is 6:31, and I will call the meeting of the Village of Trustees to order. Welcome, everybody. First up, are there any modifications or changes to the agenda? None? Is there anybody here from the comment or from the public who wishes to speak? Cindy?
I'm here representing the Enosburg Initiative, and we're here to support the Quick Build project.
That's on the agenda.
Okay, so when you get to that, but I'm just telling you why I'm here.
Anybody zooming in from the public that wishes to speak? Okay. Well, I think Elizabeth's on the agenda. Yep. So, okay. Then next, the review and approval of the minutes from February 8th. Has everybody had a chance to review the minutes?
I have a small change to make.
Okay.
On the noise ordinance, I withheld my vote. I didn't vote for or against, so I guess it would be unanimous.
Okay.
It's called abstaining. You abstained.
So in this case, what we would do is approve the minutes with that change? So
Yeah, you can approve as amended.
Okay. Okay, any other changes to the agenda? The minutes from last meeting? Okay. I'll hear a motion to approve as amended.
I move we approve as amended.
Okay.
I'll second that.
Okay, seconded. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say nay. We are moving on to item number 4, Downtown Transportation Fund Grant Application Request, FCIDC and EI. Is that you, Elizabeth?
I think that is, and I apologize. I'm in my car. I'm not driving, so that's why I'm not on video, because I'm sitting here in my garage on the phone. So I think you will recall, the trustees will recall that Jim Cameron and I came to the last meeting. I guess it was the last meeting 2 weeks ago to ask about moving forward with a grant to fund a quick build project at the Dickinson Avenue Main Street intersection. I believe Jonathan was kind enough to make copies of the draft application that I think you have in front of you. Right,
I just got this afternoon, so I printed out copies for you guys. Apologize if this didn't get to you sooner, but as I said, I just got this afternoon. So I would encourage you, if you have questions about the draft, now is the time to ask FCIDC or EI members any questions about it, because I gave this a very quick read through, but it was very quick. That's all I had time for. So there may be some things in here that I didn't see in my review of it.
Okay, Elizabeth, we're just seeing this for the first time. Is there anything you want to point out to us?
John, do you have any more copies? I haven't seen it
I
myself.
didn't.
Okay.
I didn't print out any others.
Thanks.
I have a question. I'll start it. Elizabeth, I have a question on the funding sources in the budget worksheet. The breakdown has that the whole project's going to be $14,600, and it has in-kind demo and installation as $4,600 and a cash match as $2,000. Can you kind of explain that breakdown a little bit? I know there was a 20% match.
right. So, and I do need, excuse me, and you I think you froze a little bit on my end. So we had told you when we came that we were expecting it to be about 10,000. So it actually came in, if you look at the Appendix A, doing the budget worksheet with Jim this morning, it came in at 14,600. So Jim and I calculated that the Enosburg Initiative and the in order to keep the match at the 2,000 that we said it was going to be, we put some in kind, the work on the demoing the sidewalk. And I'm trying to get to the page. And the demo of the existing sidewalk and the installation of the new sidewalk would be in kind. The EI will also be doing some of the in-kind work. So, excuse me, that's what the 4,600 is. That's what it would be to remove the existing transition of the sidewalk and then do the installation and then do the installation of the planters.
What's the cash match?
It's 2,000.
Where's that coming from? Is any of the in-kind work, does that count towards the 20%? Is that separate?
Well, so we put the 2,000 in as a cash match, which is what we're asking the trustees for, and then 4,600 would be in kind. That would leave the ask at the 8,000 that we originally discussed.
You're asking us for 4,600, basically kind of in labor and then 2,000 in cash.
Correct. And some of that labor, again, will come from the EI. I don't have the break. Yeah, I do. It's, hang on a second. Let me turn the page. So I think it's hard to do this sitting in a car. So we have, Jim calculated that it would be 2,800 to do to demo the existing curbs and sidewalks. Then it would be 6,000 to pour and to grade and pour the concrete and install those bumpy little things that are called, the only word I could find for them was detectable warning pads. Those little bumpy things on either end of the sidewalk is 6,000. So part of that would be funded through the grant, but then the other part would be in kind through the work of the village.
Elizabeth, I haven't read through all of this, but is the grant that Amy Brewer is that she's looking into, is that calculated in here?
It is not, because we don't know, by the time we get this, we don't know that we'll have that. So I did not calculate it, but that is something we could use if Enosburg is awarded those funds, the Amy Brewer funds.
Okay, so
funds.
yeah, so Amy Brewer has, there's a Rise Vermont state level grant that has the potential to be used for this project in Enosburg, somewhere between $1,500 and $2,000 that would be able to be used to cover the part of the cost of the planters.
Yeah, there is also AARP just came out with one that could also, but again, because we won't know about those funds, we couldn't include that. But between the Amy Brewer's grant and the AARP, if Enosburg should be awarded those, that could also partially fund this. So this is without those two.
Without those two.
Yeah, and the Rise Vermont funds should be awarded around, I think, April or May. So it works with the timeline of doing the project, it's not flying, as Elizabeth said.
Yeah, just another caveat of that Rise Vermont grant source states that you have to spend those funds by June 15th. Everything has to be cleared out, the administrative work done. So it does put you on a very tight deadline if you're gonna include those grant sources as a part of this. But if it's just for the planners, that might be a lot easier to do if you get the rest of this done later, after June 1st or June 30th. But then maybe, just purchase the planners or something you know,
Yeah.
that might be more doable.
Right, and that's why she wanted to apply for the planters, because that should just take 1 to 2 weeks really to make the purchase and do the paperwork.
And then the AARP grant, excuse me, has a November to implement deadline. So you would have until November to use those funds.
Sure, out of my office.
So excuse me, I got a frog in my throat. I think as far as the narrative, it is, in fact, a lot of the narrative I took straight out of the scoping study. It's not word for word because that would be plagiarism, but it's close, or the Vital Village. So as far as the actual plans for the work, it is and I think you'll see that I included a couple of pieces from the scoping study. So it is exactly what came out of there. So as far as the narrative concerns, the actual project, there's been no changes.
So one of the things, guys, that we're here for when you guys if you don't have concerns, as the zoning administrator and Shaylee as the planning commission chair, we have some concerns about some stuff because I'm just teeing it up why we're here, and like I said, just simple that we have some concerns, and Shaylee can go into it because she is the planning chair. This grant application has to be approved by the planning commission and signed ultimately by her. So there is some, I don't want to say red flags, but there's some concerns that we had, and this was all just brought to our attention Sunday. So.
Yeah, so I had briefly heard about this project in passing, listening to different meetings and stuff, but it was sent to me on Sunday asking us to hold an emergency meeting basically because it needs to be signed and done by March 7th. So I have to call a planning commission meeting and ask them to discuss, vote, and basically recommend that we sign this application and then recommend that you all apply for the grant. So as someone who doesn't know very much about this, I'm probably gonna ask questions that you've already been discussing, but I don't know the answers to these things and I can't bring it to my board without more background information. So some of my questions might be repetitive to what you've already discussed, but I do have some questions about it if this now is a good time to go through those.
Do you have Elizabeth on the phone,
Yeah.
like here too, is it okay?
I guess
Yeah,
one
I
of
mean, I think that's who the question should be addressed to,
Yeah.
is Elizabeth and anyone else from the EI that has been working on this, because quite honestly, you know, village staff has been kept in the dark with a lot of this too. As I said, I just got this draft about, maybe 2:30 this afternoon. So, you know, if there are questions to be asked about
Yeah.
this, now is the time to get them out on the table.
Well, that's actually one of my concerns as well. So, I mean, I don't have this come across very much. I mean, I've only been planning commission chair for a few years, but we don't have these come through often. But I do know typical procedure would be that the village trustees, the board, would appoint a person to go after this grant, to write the grant. So my first question is, did the trustees ask the EI to do this grant? And was there a motion and a vote of who to appoint to be the representative and write this grant? Because I know that's typically the proper channels that it goes through. Because the village is, the way it's written, the village is the applicant. So the village should have been the one asking for this grant. And also should have voted to go for this grant.
I think it kind of went a little bit in reverse of what you just described. The trustees were approached by the Enosburg Initiative. The Enosburg Initiative asked the trustees to consider applying for a grant to this source, the Downtown Transportation Fund, initially for a project that was yet to be identified. Then they came back and said they would like to do something with the crosswalk at the intersection of Dickinson and Main Street, but they were still figuring out details. So scheduled them again for tonight's meeting, and tonight they're making a further presentation and have now given the board a draft of the grant application. And at the end of this, I presume, at the end of this discussion, they're going to ask the board to approve applying for the grant application, because you're right, the EI can't be the applicant in this. It has to be the Village of Enosburg Falls.
Right.
So the trustees haven't actually made that decision yet. I think the expectation was they're going to make that decision tonight, whatever that decision is, whether they want to move forward with the grant application or not.
Well, I was just gonna say, one of the concerns that I had from it, was the deadline for this grant application has to be, it's March 7th. So we have to, the planning commission has to warn the meeting, we have to, and again, this board not having any knowledge, and I agree with you, you guys are now going through the procedure. It just, when we're, as the planning body, when we're hearing about, well, you gotta warn a meeting, a special meeting, you gotta do these things here, and we haven't even heard it from this elected body. So like you said, it feels a lot like it's the cart before the horse, and by the time this all gets approved, we've gotta get the meeting out, we've gotta do all these things, and, and we're getting all this correspondence from a group of people is what we're doing, not from you guys, the elected officials. So that's some of the frustrating things that we're, having with this. Whether the project is, it's not a yay or nay of support or not, it's just the hierarchy of how, this should go about.
Yeah, and I guess I also have questions. I know you guys have been presented with this information a couple of times, so has there been discussion with Public Works of the maintenance of this project, of whatever's installed? I've read through the application, it looks like the idea is hay bales or planters. It sounds like planters is what they're going with. Who's maintaining that, and are they permanent, are they temporary?
They're supposed to be movable.
Immovable.
Okay,
Yep.
so they'll
They
be
can be
removed in
picked
the
up for the
winter.
winter.
Okay,
Does that include when it's permanent, that they're still movable?
As far as I know, yes. That's how I understood it.
There won't be like a curb?
There's no
There's
curb.
not gonna be a
So
curve
part-
into Main Street.
Yeah, so part of the plan with this is so that obviously the moving of the sidewalk is more permanent, but the planters, part of the
Moving the
discussion.
crosswalk, really.
Yeah, sorry, what did I say?
Sidewalk.
Sidewalk, I meant the crosswalk, thank you. The planters are movable, and then they're temporary so that as a community, we can see if this works or not. So we talked about having a opportunity about 3 to 6 months down the road for community feedback to see if
And
we
how
know what it's
will
doing.
that look? Like how will you get community feedback?
Some of the things we talked about would be on a trustees meeting, but a survey, and I feel like we had talked about one more option. I'm trying to remember. I don't have those notes with me. No, I don't. But I do remember we talked about giving it a couple of months and looking for community feedback.
Because, I was just thinking of when we had the survey before, and then that was just negated. So like, is it actually, I don't, maybe, but is it actually gonna be feedback from?
Well, it is
People
feedback,
that
and the
count?
survey before was, the whole process has had a lot of feedback, and so the board has been looking at the different stages of the different bits of the feedback. We talked about making different ways of communicating out when the survey would be released to the community to make sure that we get a great variety of stakeholders.
One of the things we've been working on is a lot more community outreach, trying to get a lot more people involved in what's going on. So they actually hear, until I was appointed, I never knew when the trustees meeting was. I didn't hear about it. So we're trying Facebook, front porch forum, trying to get more people involved.
Posting meetings in more places than we have in the past.
so for the planters, who would be maintaining them? So if flowers are dying or need to be replaced or anything like that, if one gets broken, who's paying for a replacement and who is maintaining them?
That was a great
I don't know if we
question.
stepped
The
that far
maintenance
yet.
part, I think, was discussed a little bit more of kind of EI keeping up with the plants,
If
but
volunteers from EI would probably be
Correct.
taking care of all of the plantings.
I don't believe
Weeding.
replacement came up though.
No, I
as to
don't
who
know, we
would be
talked about
responsible.
having one break.
And in my copy that I was sent to bring to the planning commission, I do not have the breakdown of the funding
I guess
that you were just
that's
discussing.
what I just do.
So my only other question is why $10,000 to move a crosswalk and add some plants? That seems a little steep, but.
Looks like it's 6,000 just in concrete work.
Yeah, just
To,
because of what everything costs today.
to, yeah. Fill in a existing crosswalk entry, move it, so you gotta cut out the other curbing and pour a little entry to the street.
And then there has
That's
to
the
be
majority of the cost.
the metal
It's
plate
like
for
the
visually
disability.
impaired people. And
Shayla,
then the
it would be in
striping.
the packet, I just gave you
Okay.
to see too, so you can have that.
And this might be more directed to an EI member, but what is the reasoning for moving the crosswalk from one side to the other?
I can answer that as a
Okay.
trustee.
Sure.
That is probably the most dangerous crosswalk in the village of Enosburg. I can personally attest to having been close to being clipped on several occasions because you stand, unless you weigh 300 pounds, behind that telephone pole to get ready to cross on that crosswalk and no one can see you. It's horrific.
Yeah, it's a very
I will-
unsafe space, and then you add that it's the spot where many students are going in and out towards school. So it's a safety concern for everybody, but it's really highly trafficked.
So I did, if I can, I did run this through VTrans. I know it's a class 1 town highway, but we had a couple of questions and they provided some feedback. And they are very happy that that crosswalk is proposed to be moved because even looking at it on the map, they could see that it was not safe. So they did agree with moving the crosswalk for what that's worth.
Plus everybody coming out of the shopping center is trying to pull out right there.
Yeah,
Yeah, right, almost across the crosswalk.
yeah. Did you want to say something?
Well, I was just thinking that, I think, just from having been in some conversations, that part of it too was that the students coming out of the school are already on that side of the street. This is moving the crosswalk to the new.
But when it gets to the
Right,
Yeah.
so it stops them from having to cross the road a second time.
Where there isn't a crosswalk.
Right.
Or no, there is a crosswalk.
There is a
but-
crosswalk if you walk down
If that
the
they
side
actually
of
You have to
the
cross
road.
towards Peoples and then
Right,
cross Main.
if they actually
Right.
use it.
And the more times a person has to cross the road, the more chances they are of having an accident.
Where is this available?
I don't know if it is online, we just.
We
just
just got
got
this
it.
afternoon, Kelly. It would, FCIDC has said that they would do the grant application on behalf of the village if the Board of Trustees decide to approve moving forward with the grant application. And just about 2 o'clock this afternoon, I got a copy of the draft application. So it will become public if the
Not
board,
until after it's voted on?
right, right now it's a draft. It's not, no decision has been made yet whether it's gonna be approved or not. So at the time it's actually submitted to the state, it would become a public document anyway, and it would be in the hands of the state government.
I just have one thing, I think. On the top of page 9, one of the questions is the project located on a municipally owned property. Wouldn't that be state-owned? Is that a state road? Isn't Main Street a state highway?
No, it's referred to as a class 1 state highway, but there's a section of Route 105 and 108 respectively that are controlled locally by the village of Enosburg Falls, and they each have their different designated areas. So, but all of the length of Main Street is actually under the jurisdiction of the village of Enosburg Falls. That's why we have to plow it. We have to maintain it. If there's potholes, we have to fill them in. We have to do snow removal. The state government doesn't do that for us.
Right.
They do for some municipalities. For example, if you go to Montgomery or you go to Bakersfield, you know, their state routes are 100% maintained by VTrans, by the state government. But some municipalities in the state have some local control over sections of state routes that go through their communities. So in Enosburg Falls, it's more than just Main Street, but all of Main Street is under the jurisdiction of the village government.
So I think that part in the application would need clarification then, Elizabeth. Thank you.
I can make that more clear.
Okay, I think it's our page 8.
Do you want to see the picture? Yeah. Grab that picture. That's the best one.
And then, so if the planning commission meets and discusses and votes, and for whatever reason, the rest of the board doesn't want to recommend that we have the trustees apply, is it dead in the water, or can you all move on without planning commission approval?
So it would be dead in the water.
Just so I know if anybody asks what direction this moves in after.
Yeah, this section was identified in the Vital Village quick build, or not quick build, but oh,
The master plan.
yeah, the,
Yeah, it was in the master plan.
yeah. So
It's also in the scoping study, which is the second part of
phase 2,
the master plan.
yeah.
So there were 4 specific projects out of, there were probably 30 projects identified in the master plan in the downtown area. Part of the master plan, however, identified 4 top priority projects that the community decided they would like to see done first. And the scoping study took those 4 top priority projects, of which this was one, and further fleshed them out a little bit more. So this effort apparently would then be to try and do, what is probably the smallest, maybe the simplest of those 4 projects, which was changing that crosswalk at the Main Street Dickinson Avenue intersection.
Is this grant just for this one small project, or
Yes.
is it
Yes.
for?
The only issue I have is I was going into this, I guess, thinking that it was going to be a $2,000 match, and now we're looking at a $6,600 match, which is quite a lot different.
I think she said some of that was going to be in-kind time.
Yes.
That still costs us money. I understand EI is willing to help, and that would, I guess, count towards it, but there is also the worst case scenario is for some reason EI just totally disbands, and then we're on the hook for $6,600
Yep.
worth of time and money.
How many of the boards are on EI?
I'm not.
I am.
I haven't participated in a meeting in a year and a half or more.
You're not. You're in the EI? No.
And Sam's not.
So maybe 2.
Ish.
Yeah, ish.
EI is open to everybody.
Yes.
It's not even an
Inclusive.
organization.
Right.
It's just a group of people that meet.
But they have funding?
They might have access to funding, but EI has no funding. I can literally tell you what EI has for funding, literal funding. I think it's $210, and it's in a bank bag in my safe. And it was used to do things like get coffee and cookies to some of the merchants from Flying Disc a long time ago, when we would go in and order some cookies and take them to Ace Hardware or whatever. That was we had no treasury, that was our money.
But EI is who is writing this grant?
The Franklin County Industrial Development Corporation is writing the grant.
Yeah, EI originally approached the trustees to ask if the trustees would be supportive of a grant application. Last meeting, which was February 8th, they told the board and myself that they had found someone to actually write the grant, which was FCIDC, Elizabeth Nance specifically, who's an employee of FCIDC. So FCIDC is now, if the board approves and if the planning commission approves, is going to write the grant on behalf of the village. But the village will be the applicant. There's no way around that.
I mean, honestly, if there were still the position that Sean Kayo held, we probably would have been looking for that person to write the grant. But I think because that position is no longer available and Elizabeth was available and willing, I think that's why it went in that direction. If I'm speaking out of turn, certainly somebody can correct me,
No,
but.
that's correct. Same on number 4.
So the trustees have not voted yet to whether or not they want the EI and FDIC?
FCIDC.
FC,
Right.
okay. To
Yeah.
move forward with this in the first place.
We've given support to explore this as an option.
Okay.
Page 15.
Yeah.
But no vote has happened yet.
I
John,
think you're
do
gonna-
I continue to chair now that Sam's walked in? I
Well, if
can.
you want, you can
I just wasn't sure how
turn the
that,
meeting back
if it
over to
automatically
Sam.
happens.
It's perfectly fine to do that if you would like to.
Sam, I would like to turn the meeting over to you.
Okay. What did I miss?
So we're talking about the grant application for the quick build on Main Street. There's been a few issues brought to hand. Planning Commission needs to be informed of the grant application, right? So you can sign off on it,
Which requires them to have a.
which requires them to have a special
Yeah.
meeting because it's due March 7th. Another issue that's brought to hand is originally it was a $10,000 with a $2,000 match, and now we're looking at $14,600, so it would be a $6,600 match.
But
Basically, the way it's written.
Yeah, technically 20% is
Right.
only $2,920, but if you look, I think page 15,
15 and
15,
16.
yep.
it has
This is in
us, or it has for in-kind,
Oh, yeah, right.
the 4,600, and then an additional 2,000 cash. So it brings it to 6,600 in-kind, which some of that they're saying would be volunteer time from EI, but most of that's gonna be labor to remove.
And Sam, there's also the possibility of another grant, we're bringing in a $15,000 to $2,000 match, but that grant would not be awarded until after this application goes through.
Right. So is it the DRB that needs to hold a special meeting, or the
Planning
planning
Commission
commission?
does. So one of our concerns is on Sunday, we were contacted with the details regarding this, but it was from an EI member, which is fine, but we're, servants of you, the elected boards, you and the select board, and so it's just, not that we're not listening to them, but we want the recommendation from you guys, and these guys had none of the information, and, Shaylee's gotta sign her name on it, signing off on this, and they need to feel comfortable, knowing the details of it, and which they didn't, so.
When's your next scheduled meeting?
We don't have one.
We don't have one right now, which we can warn a special meeting, it's not a
Yeah,
huge
that's not an
deal.
issue, it's just that we didn't have the information, up until Sunday, I didn't really know any details about this, and I can't exactly bring it to a board with no information, asking them to vote and agree to something, when the trustees have also not voted on this. And typically, proper channels would be the trustees would vote of whether or not they want the grant to be applied for, and then somebody from the trustees would either appoint a representative, or a trustee would reach out to the planning commission chair for a vote, and then to
Yeah.
sign and agree.
I would say actually that, if this particular, and every grant source is different, but if this particular grant source has that requirement that there has to be a recommendation from the planning commission, it really should have went to you first. You guys should have reviewed everything, and then you should have come to the board of trustees with a recommendation from the planning commission whether or not to move forward with the grant application. It's kind of all being done in reverse right now. you know, it was started by the EI. The EI reached out to FCIEC. Those two groups came to the trustees. You, almost after the fact, were informed about it over a weekend, and now you're coming to the Board of Trustees to find out what the Board of Trustees think about it, when really you should be coming to the Board of Trustees to tell them what you think about it. So it's all, this has all been kind of going in reverse almost. But, so I can sympathize with your frustration.
And if there was more
There's-
time, then we would have time to discuss it and go about this the right way, but since we have to have a special meeting and get the application in by next week, this was the next
Yeah.
time to come and discuss this.
And these guys won't be meeting again before
Right.
March
Right.
7th either. So you guys kind of have to make a decision about whether you're going to support this or not tonight. You know, unless you want to call a special meeting for next week or something yourselves, but you won't have another regular meeting before March 7th.
Where would the cash match come out of?
This is all that's to be directed at Elizabeth. This is all their stuff that they put together. Elizabeth, can you re-explain to Sam the breakdown with the in-kind demolition at 4,600 and where the cash match is expected to be coming from?
Yeah, so I sat down, got a chance to sit down with Jim this morning, and he calculated all of the expenses. And because we had said, you know, trying to keep to our word that the cash would be 2,000. The total came in higher than we expected. He estimated 14,006. So we are asking for 10,000 from the state, and we can up that. There's nothing that says it has to be 10,000. But I went with the original numbers, then the in-kind for the demo and the installation, the demo of the existing sidewalk and ramps, there's the transition to the street. And then the installation of the new sidewalk and crosswalk, we have as in kind of 4,600. That leaves the cash match at the originally agreed to 2,000. But there is nothing that says that we can't ask for more than the 8,000 that we're asking for from the transportation fund. I just left it the original amounts with the in-kind being 46. So that leaves a total between cash and in-kind at 6,600.
600.
Now, correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe the first time when we spoke about this, the in-kind can just be the labor. It doesn't necessarily have to be a cash match, because I don't believe, and correct me if I'm wrong, but at the last meeting that we said we were going to do the 2,000, it was said that it could be just labor up to the whatever the 20% was.
That's how I remember.
That's how I remember.
Okay. So we never committed to.
And that's
writing a
correct.
check.
Thank you for,
Okay.
right.
Like I said, the only issue I have is EI says they will help with that, but there's the worst case scenario that EI just totally disbands, and we would be on the hook for 6,600 worth of labor and cash.
I'm
And
sure our guys already have plenty enough in this summer as it is.
So realistically, could this funding sources kind of be restructured to only represent what the actual 20% is, which is the 2,920? I understand that the in-kind demo and installation, if the village staff were to do that, is obviously going to be at a higher cost than that, but
Well, and I think that was we can restructure it. However, I'm just writing it. I can do what you want. And you know, that makes sense. But I think in the end of the day, and correct me if I'm wrong, that demo and installation will be done by the village. So in a way, it makes sense to take credit for all of the work that they're doing, as in kind. But I can certainly, we can increase the overall ask to 12, I can't do math in my head that quick. So that the in-kind is the 2,900.
Do we have time for any of those changes though?
I can make the changes tomorrow morning.
They'll have to approve it and then have to go through planning as well.
And the planning commission still has
When did you guys start working on this specific grant project?
It came to me the week before the last trustees meeting.
Around February 1st, and the last board meeting was February 8th.
Yeah, I think I got it the Wednesday or Thursday before.
Is this gonna be the last time a grant like this comes up?
I'm just writing it because I was asked to, so, you know, I don't foresee anything.
Right, it seems pushed to make the deadline and there'd be a lot of last minute changes. And I just feel it'd be better to have like a more revised version to approve.
And go about it the right way, go to the planning
And
commission
go through it the
first.
right way, that way there's no oversights. That and the numbers are a little different than we first thought. But that's just my opinion.
Sam Allen has her hand up.
Ellen?
I don't, maybe Elizabeth has seen something on this because she's been through the application or whatever, but the reason that we can apply for this is because we're a designated downtown. And so there's only a specific pool of people in Vermont who can apply, period. And I hesitate to say, but I think that it's a thing that comes up each year. And I would also like to echo that it would be my hope that if there were someone in a Sean Kyle position, that we could have more of a calendar of when these things are due so that we could apply for them with more notice. But because that isn't, you know, I would, as someone who goes to EI meetings, I would like to say that in a good faith effort to try to keep something going as far as moving forward with improving the town, we were doing the best we could with the deadlines that we had, and we're grateful to Elizabeth for putting the time in. And I'd also like to ask a question. What is the regular meeting of the Planning Commission? Is it the third Wednesday?
I feel like the website says as needed.
DRB
Oh,
is
that's
as
DRB.
needed right now. We haven't, Ellen, the planning commission right now hasn't been meeting. We're in the process of updating the bylaws, and we're kind of waiting for our direction from regional, regional planning to go with those. So we haven't had board meetings, regular board meetings. We're going to be here shortly because we do need to update the village bylaws. So that's coming up. So we will have a more regular schedule for meetings.
Because that is a fact that I have known pre-pandemic, and I would have totally been willing to be at the third Wednesday of February if that was a thing that was happening. But it just because of the pandemic and because we weren't sure of what the scheduling was, I agree that it's very short notice, but it's also, a timing thing as far as you guys having open meetings that we could get on your agenda to come to.
Right, and I mean, I'm always there, so if there's ever questions or anything about that, I'm there 5 days a week. You know, my email, I get out, you know, so if there's ever a question where it comes to this, I mean, shoot it off, you know,
And multiple EI members have my email as well, and that's how it did get to me. So if the planning commission did need to hold a meeting, we could have been asked to
Right.
have one prior to Sunday.
Kind of wonder, as a board, like, I don't know that process, right? So did not know that that was an oversight at all. Who would have held that, like, do we know
How would
that?
we have known?
Because, I mean, it's important that, like, we make sure that it's clear for future stuff. You know, like, Ellen said, like, the person in the position Sean held before would hold that, especially balancing between the two municipalities. I don't know, maybe it's
So
just
Jesse
for
is in
thought
the
for next
office
time.
as well, though, as the zoning administrator, and he does actually take direction from planning commission as well.
Yeah, I guess it just, none of us, it wasn't a question that any of us had. So it's something it's a learning experience right now.
So moving forward, are we thinking of holding off for now, let them revise this? 'Cause are we at least in agreement that the ideas sound, that we do want this sort of a project, and maybe this particular grant isn't one, maybe they missed the deadline on that, but in the future, save all this, that way they have it? Do we have
I
it?
feel that way.
Well, and I think that there probably is more money out there,
Right.
that, you know, everybody could be, Ward has his hand up, on constant watch for what's coming next.
Well, and I know Ward has his hand up, and Ward, it's good to see you. I will point out that typically the downtown transportation funds money are not available to designated village centers. This is the first year, and I don't know if it's going to continue, that designated village centers are able to apply for downtown transportation funds. And you're only able to apply because you got the Better Connections grant. Had you not gotten the Better Connections grant in 2018, you would not be eligible to apply for this grant in the future.
Or did you have a comment?
Yes, I would, as I listen to this, it sounds to me because of a failure to have a clear process that we followed. At the last minute, we're going to say we're not going to go ahead with this. When it seems to me there's the goodwill that I see in the room, and we ought to be able to figure out some way to go ahead with this, which has been gestating for, is it a year or 2 years? And so I would encourage the board to see if we can find a way in the group to get past the next step, including the participation of the development board, rather than to forego it and wait to see what happens next.
That is an option.
So we could hold a special meeting of our own.
That would
if
require a
that's the
special
only
meeting as
agenda
well.
item.
For the.
It is, I
We're
mean,
gonna
it's a
have to do
huge
special
safety issue.
regardless, so.
Absolutely.
You know, that's the part of me that hates to see it fall by the wayside and us not be able to get the opportunity to get, you know, some of this money again for this particular project, is that it's such a safety issue.
Absolutely.
I would kind of echo what Ward is saying. I think that as I'm sitting here writing notes, I'm like, okay, so next time EI is talking about things, email Jesse and Shaylee, like invite them to a meeting, or, you know, certainly I think it was just a pure effort to try and, again, move things forward, look at an area where it was a small piece of something that could potentially be done to better the situation. So I definitely echo what Ward was saying, and would hope that, you know, as unfortunate as it is, I think sometimes you do have to jump through hoops to make things happen, and certainly it would be extremely appreciated, I think, by many, if the oversight in including Jesse and Shaylee first hadn't happened, that, you know, everybody could work together to try and make it happen by that deadline. Because I think it truly was just an oversight. As I'm sitting here making notes, saying next time.
Sam, David has his hand up as well.
Dave?
I guess at this point, I've been listening to this whole situation. My comment would be, do we really have a good reason for not going forward with it? And if there is a good reason, what is it?
Are you asking what reasons those are?
For what reason would you not want to go forward with it at this point?
Well, to me, how it seems is the application was a little bit hurried. It may not be exactly what we were initially proposed, and there's still modifications that need to be done to it. And there's still two boards that would have to meet over those modifications and approve them. So to me, that's, I think, if I'm understanding it correctly, that's what the issues are.
Did you even have time if you had to warn a meeting, a special meeting for this board? And then if they voted and then the planning commission had to warn a special meeting?
I think it's gonna depend on, well, for you guys, it's gonna depend on how quickly the planning commission can meet, because I don't think it's gonna make any sense for you guys to set a meeting until after these guys have met and
2 days.
decided. What's that?
Be a minimum of 2 days after their meeting.
Right, you have to give at least 48 hours notice on a special meeting. So after these guys meet and make their decision about whether they want to recommend it or not, if they don't want to recommend it, then I think that's it, that's the end of it. If the planning commission does want to recommend it to the board, then you guys can set a special meeting date yourself. But it doesn't make sense for you to do that until they make their decision after they've reviewed the project and the application.
Could we warn
So
the meeting and then
it's
cancel
gonna
it?
depend on, when they're able to set their meeting and make a decision about it, as to
when
how
that might
quickly
be?
you can meet. But you only need 48 hours
Yeah, I was gonna say,
notice.
you could warn it in 48 hours, again, it's just a matter of having the quorum. We're already down 2 people, we have a 5-member, it's supposed to be a 7-member board, and we have 5 on it, so we have to have 4 for our quorum. So, as long as we can wrangle up 4 people, then,
And we did already send this out to the planning commission just to let them know what
So
was
they're
going
aware
on, and we
already.
haven't received a response at all yet, so.
On top of that, it's contingent if the board wants to put $6,600 towards a $14,000
And we
grant.
don't, keep in mind too, none of that was
Wasn't
budgeted.
budgeted.
Right,
Didn't Elizabeth say she could revive that, so it would?
right, we could put in a recommendation
Yeah.
saying that.
You're still looking at 29, 20.
29, 20. But then we're still, at the end of the day, the expectation is that the village is gonna be doing the labor to remove and install, so we're really, would be contributing closer to the 6,600 at the end of the day. Even with revising the way the numbers look on paper.
So I guess one of my questions is, would the village be able to do that this year? Right.
Well, we didn't give them the other public works position,
Right.
so that tells us that they're already in. But
Can you, I didn't hear what you said, Sam.
so there's another proposed position for the highway department, another labor position, because they're kind of short-staffed already, and it wasn't in the budget this year. So they're still short-staffed, and then this would be adding another project on top of that.
So if I may, projects don't need to be
ahead.
completed until April 25th, 2025. So you have 3 years to complete the project.
That makes a big difference.
Cindy?
I thought that the trustees had been approached about some money for this project, for a match for $2,000. Am I wrong about
Yeah,
that?
well, that was with Amy Brewer.
Yeah, we talked
Or is there
about
something different?
I don't know, I thought that the
They
village
came-
had considered
They
some
came to
money.
us with an initial proposal of
Initial-
applying for $10,000, which would make the 20% match 2,000, but it was discussed that that would be in-kind labor and not
Okay.
actually having to contribute
Right.
physical cash to this project.
Well, my comment is that if it is a safety issue and there's, free money coming to the village, it's not just flowers, it actually, could save a life. I think it's something that if we can make it work, we should try, and if we fail, fine. But I think to give up before we try to get that, I think it's an important, project for the kids. The way it's gonna be, they'll be able to just stay on the block that the schools are on and then make that one cross, not crossing Dixon and going behind
And
the.
not be blocked by a utility pole.
Right, so that's just, my
I
thoughts.
I just
anyways.
want to add again, that this quote is only for $14,000. Like, if we needed it to happen soon, we could budget for next year and get it done next year. That wouldn't affect the tax rate much. So,
And not
No,
get
it's
any
good.
grant money, not take any grant money?
Floated it
well,
to
that's,
the loan.
right, that's what I'm saying.
Or we could potentially, if we can align all the meetings, get the money and budget like the difference next year. So do we want to make the attempt and see if we can get the meetings, and if we can't, there goes the grant this year, and maybe the work's done, it sets it up in case there's another grant option later down the road.
Nobody's gonna know if we don't try.
I feel like we have to at least change how the funding is. So that it would be a 29-20 match, not a 60, or at least on paper.
29, 20.
That would be the 20%
20%
of
of
14.6.
14.6.
So what I can do, I can make those changes first thing in the morning. Shaylee, I have your email address. I think we've emailed a couple of times. I'm happy to share that with you. Also, if you let me know when the planning commission meeting is, I'm happy to come and be able to answer any questions. I don't think I have any evening appointments in the next week or two, so I might actually be able to come in person if you're doing in person. If not, I can do Zoom.
Okay, yeah, it would likely be in person, but there is a Zoom option, so it's whatever your preference is.
Okay, and is it my understanding that we want to try to keep our contributions to in-kind work rather than cash for now?
So I definitely see it.
Yep.
So I guess moving forward, Elizabeth, you want to make those adjustments? And I guess we're gonna try to make it work.
Okay, yeah, I'll do that. I will email Jonathan and Shaylee. Is there anybody else I need to email in the morning?
Yeah, you should include Abby in this. Remember, Elizabeth, my last day with the village
yeah,
is
okay.
Friday. So it's most likely probably gonna be Abby that is setting the special meeting for the board if the planning commission does agree to approve a recommendation to them. So I would include Abby on that as well.
Okay. Can do.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, we're on number 5, right?
Yes.
Proposed electric repairman AMI project with Vexa, Ken Nolan, and Ken St.
Abby, can we keep that?
Yeah.
Yep.
Yep.
Jonathan put the last presentation in your packet, but I wanted to make sure.
Hi, guys, thank you.
Have a good night, guys. Yeah, Ken, I did
The
when you were up
business
here last in October
Yeah.
with Ken Sanmore. I did put that in their packet, so they've got that presentation in there.
Okay, so you've got the
On the
business
AMI.
case.
Mm-hmm.
The other thing I wanted the cost, I don't think was given clearly to you, so I wanted to try to make that more explicit.
Thanks, Ken.
So this is our second visit on the AMI project. We were here a couple of months ago, went through the presentation, laying out generally what the AMI is, what the equipment looks like, what the project entails, the 3-year process we've gone through to get to this point. So tonight it's just the, thank you. Tonight, here to answer any questions you might have come up with over the last couple months, anything didn't make sense. Also wanted to bring you up to date on the latest developments that are ongoing here. So the cost on the sheet I handed out, we're looking at both a 1-year cost, that's capital associated with changing all the meters, so every electric meter would have to be changed out. It also includes electronics on your water meters so that they can communicate with the system. Includes the labor to do all that installation. And then some ancillary costs that you run into. Typically when you're changing meters out, there's going to be meter sockets, a couple meter sockets you run into. They're rusted or something that you need to bring up to code, so we build in money for that. There's also an integration cost, so this system would communicate with your billing system, and there's some labor associated with making that connection. So you've got a year 1 cost involved with getting the whole system operational. Then there's an ongoing annual cost, mostly associated with software. So the meters that are put out in the field will be communicating electronically back, sending data in, so you don't have to actually have someone drive around and read the meters anymore. You need the software to be able to store and manipulate that. So then there's an annual ongoing software cost, $20,000-ish to run that. So just to be clear on what the cost would be to move forward with this in total. Vexa has been working pretty diligently over the last 3 months to try to figure out how to handle this and turn it into more of a monthly expense rather than having to come up with money up front. So we're working with TD Bank, so our lender, to put in place essentially a construction loan. So it would allow the cost to be held on Vexa's books. Would look like a contract to Enosburg Falls. You'd sign an agreement with Vexa for the project. We would cover the upfront cost and then turn that into a monthly charge, similar to what we do with other projects that you do with us. A lot of the power projects that you're in are treated the same way. So that is nearing final result. We got a term sheet from TD Bank, and we're just trying to put that in place now. Certainly free to pay up front if you want to, or borrow through your own bank. It doesn't really matter, but we wanted to make sure there was an option working through us and getting the economies of scale, because we'll have several members are interested in going that route. The other thing we're working on pretty hard right now is trying to get state funding. I think I mentioned the last time we were here, the utilities that went forward with these meters previously, most of the state did this back in 2010, 2012. Those utilities got a 50% credit from the federal government through the American Recovery and Reinvestment Act, the ARA money that you may remember. Pretty much the Vexa members, the small municipals, and Washington Electric Co-op chose not to move forward back then. So we're now faced with having to foot the whole bill. So we've been going in front of the legislature and arguing that now the state's getting all this money from the federal government, there's billions of dollars flowing into the state, that they should earmark part of that money to offset the cost to those utilities that didn't go forward previously. So we've asked for a 50% match in state funds to cover the expense. I testified on that on Friday, and I just found out this afternoon that the Energy and Technology Committee is including that as a recommendation in their the way the funding works, the Energy Committee makes a recommendation to the Appropriations Committee, and then they have to decide what actually is in the budget. So we've cleared the first hurdle, and we're continuing to push that through. So I'm hopeful that when we get to the end of the legislative session, that we'll be able to sit here and say the cost is half of what's in front of you right now. So we're trying to line this up effectively so that we get all of the member utilities comfortable with what we're proposing, that we answer any questions you may have, that we get the contracts between Vexa and the members in place, which we're on the final version of that now. Should be able within a few weeks to send that out for everybody to look at. But not ask for a final vote until we see what the legislature's going to do. Because frankly, I don't want to give them an excuse to say they don't have to fund it because everyone's already agreed to move forward.
So if all the VEPSA members do agree to move forward, would VEPSA recommend AMIs regardless if there's federal funding?
We would, actually. The timing will be a little bit different. I think if we can get funding from the state, we're going to try to start this spring, depending on when they pass it. Probably won't come out until April or May, the way they typically work. But shortly after that, we'll be trying to get the first utilities going forward. So we've already got Swanton, Northfield, and Lindenville have expressed interest in going this year, and we're rolling out, planning on three utilities per year over the next 3 years. So it wouldn't be something you'd have to start with right off, but we are seeing the regulators and legislature putting more requirements in place that essentially require you to do this technology upgrade. In order to do time of use rates and some of the electric vehicle programs that they're rolling out, you need to be able to get the 15-minute data. And if you're going to get 15-minute data, really, it's not worth having your people drive around and try to gather that. It pays to move to this technology. In your case, I think the business case shows that your payback, it's on page 3 of the business case in the presentation. There's a little chart in there that shows that you go cash flow positive in year 3, and the payback period is just over 5 years for Enosburg, which is actually, of the 11 members we've got, it's one of the shorter payback periods.
And that's if we're paying the full amount, it's 5 years?
Correct. What we find is the members that have electric and water meters, because you're running both systems over this, it tends to shorten the payback. Folks that just have electric tend to be like 6 or 7 years to get the money back. Which, those are the ones that really, when you get to 7 years, it's a little bit iffy whether it makes sense or not. So that's where we're using the argument to get the funding, but we're applying for everybody and trying to get equal treatment.
It's not like those meters have to be replaced every 7 years though, do they?
The projected life is 15. There's a warranty for the first 5 years. They're projected to last 15, and it's like with other meters, some will last 10, some will last 20. But on average, they should last 15 years before you have to do a recycle.
And is the software that you're talking about, where it reports the data back to the office, is that compatible with most billing softwares?
Tough question. The way it's compatible with the software is you go through a conversion routine. So every billing system, of the 11 members, we've got 8 different billing systems. And there's gonna have to be a translation from the meter data, the language the meter software uses, to the language your billing system uses. Every one of the utilities are gonna have to go through that. So I wouldn't say it's directly compatible, but it's a standard process that you go through every time you do one of these projects. Some of the software they've pre-written, but not all of them. So you quite often have to go in and have specialized conversion software written.
I will say on the customer service side of it, just for us in the office answering customer calls, AMI system would be beneficial because we'd be able to access kind of the meter information, like Ken was saying, the 15 minutes. So people call up when it starts to get cold because they see their bill is doubled, and obviously that sets them into panic of what's going on. They call us, we have to go through a series of questions, process of elimination. Do you have an electric heater turned on? Do you run this? Do you run that? So for the customer service side of it, it would make it easier for us to access their information and see, okay, between 8 and midnight, your usage spiked this much, and then they can think about what happened. So there are some huge benefits in that aspect for us.
Yeah, I've personally run across a couple of cases, kind of comical cases, where customers called up with a high bill complaint, and then in a matter of a couple minutes, the staff was able to pinpoint what was going on. In one case, the person had a condo in Vermont, was living in Florida in the winter, got a bill that was fairly high, called to complain, and the utilities looking at their meter and said, no, there's usage. It's a typical residential pattern, you can see it. Sent the staff member out, and it turns out the person's son had moved into his condo while he was in Florida. But it was very obvious from just a look as to what was going on.
Helps with rereads and accuracy of it too. Right now staff has to go through all of the meter readings if there's some that are pegged high, which are system flags, and then look at them and see, was it an error, is something going on, and then process of elimination to try to figure out if it was an error with the meter reading, and if we're having issues with the meter, or if they plugged in an electric heater.
Do these automatically report outages?
They do.
And so that could be easier for techs to pinpoint exactly where something's wrong.
Yeah, so the meters, they're like a computer on the side of the house. So you're going to get back kilowatt hours like you do today. You can also include reactive power, K-bar. You can do potentially a power factor calculation on every single house, where today a power factor meter is typically only on large commercial or industrial. The AMI, you get that as part of the package. You can do a power factor calculation. You can set them to bring back voltage, so you can see the voltage on every single house and see where you're having problems, or where there might be a dip or the line needs to be upgraded or something. You get the outage notification, and if you combine the outage with a GIS mapping, which is another project we're working on in Enosburg, then you can start to get a visual available to your customers, your staff, as to where the outages are happening. And as you're putting the meters back on, you'll see them giving notice that they're coming back online. So any cases you think you fixed the outage, and then there's that one person at the end whose meter didn't come back, well, now that'll become obvious. You don't have to wait for them to call you. There's a lot of analytics around it, because when you're getting the 15-minute data on every single customer, if you think about it, you can take 4 or 5 customers that are attached to the same transformer. You can add that load up and start to see what the loading on the transformer is, and whether it's as people buy their electric vehicle or put in a heat pump or whatever they're going to do in their home. You can start to see where equipment's overloading before it actually becomes a problem. So once you get the meter technology in place and you get the software installed and collect the data, there's a lot of analytics you can do on it that will improve the operation. And that's something we're looking to centralize. That's part of the reason we're trying to get all 11 members, because then we can share the staffing resources to do that analysis.
So it sounds like there's a lot of benefits. Is there anything that you would watch out for, like negative effects of AMI?
I wouldn't say negative effects. These are complicated projects. That's part of the reason that the Vexa members didn't do this back in 2010-11, because it's complicated, it can be expensive. A lot of the negative we saw in the past was related to the software piece, because you had to have an on-premise software, so you needed to have a server in the office, and you paid for the software to upgrade, and like the meters might last 15 years, but the software tends to get upgraded every 4 or 5. And if you have to install new software in your building, it tends to be pricey. One of the things we've resolved here is this software would be cloud-based. So we wouldn't actually have the servers here. It would be accessed over the internet. And Aclara, the vendor, is responsible for the software maintenance to upgrade. So built into that $20,000 a year, it's on the vendor to make sure the software stays up to date. So I think there's still a potential for the project to be difficult, timing can get delayed, you run into some customer issues potentially when you're changing out every meter, not everybody's going to be happy. But I think we've mitigated most of the negatives.
This is something that we could phase in though.
You could. The way we're thinking about it now, the members would all be sharing one database. So the first thing we would do is stand up that software with the first utility that goes through it. And right now, I think the projection is Swanton would be the first one to go. And we test out with them, they're already on board with this. So that would be up and running and be available whenever you decide to go forward. The next phase would be to come in and put what they call data collection units. So there's little they're boxes we put on the electric poles that collect, they're central points that all the data comes back to. Meters kind of communicate with that, and then that box is connected either to cell phone or fiber optics to get the data back. So that network would be put in place all at once whenever you're ready to start the project. So we'd overlay Enosburg, I think there's 20 or 24 units spread throughout your territory. And then once those are in place, you can plug the meters in at your leisure, that's one decision you'll have to make as to whether you want to do that conversion with your own staff, in which case you might go slowly. In the budget, there's money we've assumed a cost of $35 a meter. So there's funding built into the project to hire an outside vendor to come in and do it, if you chose to go that route. That's really up to you.
I'm all out of questions. Anybody else?
How does this affect our ratepayers in any way? In terms of additional costs to them? In other words, okay, now I'm the homeowner, and I was like, oh, you've gone to this new stuff, and now I'm having to pay X number of dollars more, and I don't want to do that. Why am I having to do it? Is there any of that that's going to come back to get us?
Yeah, depends on how you structure it. The cash flow analysis we've done, you're going to have a big expense in year 1, and then you'll see savings beginning in year 2 going forward. So the question really boils down to how do you deal with that big expense in year 1? And that's why we're working with the legislature, and we're working
Because
with
it's explaining that to everybody that's
and we're working with the banks to try to turn that big year 1 cost. First of all, cut it in half,
that's a problem.
and then everything that we're left to pay to spread that over the 15-year period. I think if we can get that in place so it looks more like an annual cost to you, then you should see that come out at least break even, and hopefully the way the project's structured, if our numbers are anywhere near correct, you would see an annual decrease in your costs.
Okay, thank you.
Correct me if I'm wrong, Ken, but isn't the state pushing towards requiring most utilities to go towards AMI in the future? So right now we have the option to, but it may not be an option down the road if we don't make this decision.
Yeah, I've had that same conversation with the Department of Public Service recently, as in 2 weeks ago. I don't think you're ever going to hear them say you must put in AMI. But what they're doing is they're passing rules, and the legislature's actually gotten into the act now too. They're passing requirements that say, oh, you have to have a time of use rate for electric vehicles. Time of use rate is a rate that varies throughout the day. So your cost is higher during the daytime, lower at night typically. The only way you can do that is really to be able to calculate the usage over blocks of time, how much the customer used between noon and 4 p.m., for example. That's really hard to do with traditional meters. The meters on a typical house just record how much over a month. You can get mechanical meters that do time of use, but you have to preset them in the meter shop and then put them on the house. So if you change your time period, you gotta go out and pull the meter, reprogram it, put it back on. With AMI, because you're getting that every 15-minute reading, you can change the time of use rates within the software. You never have to visit the house. So, long answer to say, they're putting in place these rules that kind of drive you to AMI, but they're not actually going to require you to buy the equipment.
We don't have to make a decision on this till we hear back about the possibility of the federal funding coming through, correct?
Yeah, so there's 3 things I want to come here for a final yes or no vote. I want to have the contract that we're asking you to sign. So we want to get that to a point where I'm comfortable with it, my staff's comfortable, and then we're going to send it out to the members so that you all can take a look at it and see if you have any concerns or questions. But I want that in place. I want the final loan terms from TD Bank. I've got a draft, but they haven't blessed it yet, still going through their approval process. And I think we need to have a final decision from the state as to whether we're going to get funding or not. When I've got those 3 things, then we can come back and have a conversation about whether it makes sense for you to go.
I feel like it would be a much easier decision if we find out that there's going to be a 50%
Well, yeah,
match.
it's a fair percentage.
50% match, 12-year no from TD. Let's go.
Yeah, I mean, I can't say it's a guarantee. It's got a long road ahead to get funding, but we're doing all
We're
we
headed in
can.
the right direction.
You're working on it.
Yeah.
So do you need expressed interest from us?
No, I think, with Jonathan moving on to another position, we just wanted to come back and close the loop with him, answer any questions you've got at this point, and then we'll be back for the final vote. Hopefully this summer, but I think we've got time with Enosburg because, like I said, we've got 3 members that are already going to go ahead this year. So we really would be looking for your yes or no, kind of going into 2023.
Great. Anybody have any other questions? All right, well, we'll be looking forward to hearing from you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, up next, Electric Department proposed WARP program with Canada.
That's me again.
Different hat.
Yeah, we're acting more as an intermediary on this one. Sorry about this, I got a couple more sheets to hand out here. So it's called the Weatherization Reimbursement Assistance Program.
That's a mouthful.
They always have to have an acronym.
The world runs on acronyms.
Start with you, going back the other way. So I'm a core substitute. If this is something you're interested in going forward with, we can have BHFA come and talk to you. They're the folks that are running it. But I figured before we get to that level, I can give you a kind of briefing on what the program is and how it works.
Well, now, it isn't an ordinary cookie. If you're gonna have a cookie, you have to raise a glass, take a good look at your cookie, and congratulate John.
Congratulations, we
Because
got a bottle,
those
so I'm
are-
gonna finish the whole bottle today.
Those are champagne. So drink the cookie, eat the cookie, take your choice.
Today was drinking day.
I'm sure it was. You've had a long, rough day.
Thanks, Sandy.
You're welcome.
We got a hole about this big.
So everybody gets to toast you when
Found
you
it.
eat a cookie.
It blew a whole piece of about that big. I have a water hammer or what it was.
Dinosaur stepped on the street. A dinosaur stepped on the street.
You missed it, that's what my son did sleeping in.
Yeah,
This is the dinosaur, but I'm not gonna tell him
that's
that.
a big foot.
Big hole.
So the RAP program, I guess to go back a couple of steps, last year, the legislature set aside $10 million for a weatherization program. This came out of federal funding as well. They gave that money to VHFA, Vermont Housing Finance Authority, and tasked them with creating a program that would help low to moderate income Vermonters access weatherization services through a loan program. What the problem they were trying to get at is it's very often difficult for low-income people to borrow money from a bank. If you have a bad credit rating or you don't have the financial capability to do these projects, it's really difficult to move forward. So the concept here was to set aside the $10 million, give it to a state agency, so VHFA is essentially a state authority, they're not a traditional bank, and have them come up with a program that would allow the customers to access funding without being reliant upon their credit rating or their financial capability. So they spent the last year working on this. What they came up with is a combination of three things. So VHFA, as the lender, will be doing the credit evaluation, and it's not a traditional credit evaluation. They're essentially looking at the customer's electric utility payment history. So they're not worried about bad credit rating, they're not worried about loans outstanding. They're looking strictly at the fact of have you paid your electric bill over a period of time. If you have, then you're eligible for funding. Once you pass that screen, they're looking at the project you want to construct. And again, this is mostly around weatherization, although it can be used for a combination of weatherization and heating system upgrades. As long as you are able to wrap it into like heating and fuel conversion, it's all eligible for funding. The catch is whatever you borrow from them, whatever the cost of the project is, it has to be projected to save you more in your monthly expenses than the monthly cost of once you turn the project cost into a loan. So if a loan is $50 a month, the projected savings on your energy bill has to be at least $50 a month or more, because they want it to be cash flow positive. So they've brought in the efficiency utilities, in our case, Efficiency Vermont, is going to be tasked with helping the customers do an audit, do the analysis on what this projected savings from these weatherization projects are. And Efficiency Vermont's going to have to sign off and say, yes, for spending this amount of money to weatherize the home, it will produce more savings than the monthly cost of the project. So you pass the screening with VHFA saying, yep, you paid your electric bills, you passed the screening for the project with Efficiency Vermont. Then it comes to where the utility gets involved. And the concept is because this is tied to the electric bill, they're looking for the electric utilities to be the ones to actually collect the funds from the customer. The reason they want that is because the loan would be tied to the electric meter. So if someone sells their home, or if it's a renter who happens to move out of the property, they don't take the loan with them personally. it stays with the electric meter, and whoever moves into that house next takes on the obligation to continue paying the loan. And the theory is, the weatherization is happening at the particular property, so the benefits are going accruing to that property, and whoever is living there should be the ones that are paying the loan. The way they've structured it, VHFA is responsible for all the loan loss reserve. There's no liability on the utility. You're strictly an agent for them. VHFA would tell you which customer has the loan, what the loan amount is that they're supposed to pay every month. You would put it on the electric bill. The person pays you, and you pass the money to VHFA. If the person doesn't pay you, if they skip a month, you don't owe VHFA anything. They're responsible for tracking that. So they've been shopping this concept around the last couple of months. Most of the larger utilities have agreed to sign on. They presented to the Vexa board last month, and we said we would start polling the utilities to see who was interested. The concept is they would like to make a filing in April with the Public Utility Commission. So each utility that's participating would have to put a tariff in place that allows us, the Public Utility Commission would have to approve that. They want to make that filing in April, which then allows, because there's a 45-day notice before it can go into effect, that would allow the program to start July 1st. No obligation to sign on. This is strictly opt-in if you're interested. You can always sign up and join later. Right now, they're just looking for what's the group of utilities that are willing to move forward and put this together for an April filing. And as I said, VHFA's offered to come and speak to any trustees that want to dive deeper. Obviously, they're managing the whole program, so they've got a lot more details than I do.
So the participant roles, what are the acronyms? EEU?
That's the Energy Efficiency Utility. That's the Efficiency Vermont, essentially.
Okay. And then you said the VHFA is the Vermont Housing Finance Authority. Who's DU?
It's a distribution utility, shorthand for distribution
That's us?
utility. Yeah.
I would have questions on just the logistics of it, I guess, in the end, especially if we're having to add something to our bill, if our software that we have has that capacity. So just whatever the trustees decide, I feel like we have some logistic questions that we need to figure out before we dive in headfirst on this, just to make sure that our software is compatible and how much more work that's going to put on for staff in the office, especially if we're fielding any bill questions and a bunch of stuff regarding this. So I don't.
That's where the questions will come.
Like what happens when a renter moves out, another renter moves in, and nobody made the second renter aware that there's a $50 a month loan in this account.
Right, there's a lot of.
But you have really good insulation.
Right.
But the theory behind it is, though, that their power bill should have gone down at least.
Yeah, and then your power bill is low because,
Yeah.
therefore.
The challenging thing, I think, from a customer service standpoint is you get the electric bill actually will probably go up because you're going to have the electric bill plus your whatever your loan payment is.
You get approved on that the heat bill went
But
down.
most people, their oil or propane or whatever bill is going to have dropped, and a lot of customers don't make that connection between, oh, my heating bill went down, my electric bill went up. Yeah, a VHFA has also said to be determined, but they're willing to build into this an administrative fee to the utility. So if we can calculate what the time is to process this, they'll add that on. They're thinking $5 per customer per month. It's not going to pay for a lot of admin time. So that's another question I think you'd have to work out. The software came up at the Vexa board meeting. Some of our board members have past billing experience, so their mind immediately goes to the logistics of how I'm going to do this. Some have suggested that depending on your software, you may have to create like a separate account to track the loan because the software can't add it on to the customer bill. So the devil is definitely in the details. First step is, are you interested at all in doing something like this? And if you are, then we'd have to spend the time to work out what does the tariff look like, how does the software work, can it happen, what's the staff time, all of that kind of next level would have to be looked at.
Is this, like, what's the length of these loans? And this is kind of like an indefinite, people can do this 5 years from now, a customer could consider doing this?
Yeah, the term I think is a maximum of 10 years. They're trying to limit the time and limit the amount. So you're kind of boxed in to say, well, it has to produce more savings than cost. It's kind of going to limit to a few $1,000s loan up to 10-year term. But each loan will be based on the particular parameters of what the customer is trying to do. Both from a utility and customer standpoint, in theory, this should be available going forward. They're trying to turn it into like a revolving, so as customers pay it back, it just builds up the fund again. But there's only that $10 million set aside. So there is a possibility that that money gets all handed out and then they either have to go on hiatus or they lose the money because people don't pay back and they have to shut down. But what they're striving for is to get this up and running and be able to be perpetual.
All right. Any other questions?
So just let Abby know, and she can let us know if you want to move forward, and we're happy to act as an intermediary to put things forward if it's of interest.
Do you have a specific contact at the HFA? Like if I send you an email tomorrow, who to speak to? Okay, so I'll reach out to maybe get some more information to bring back to the board. Thank you.
That'd be great. Thank you.
And Steve Farman in our shop is point for the tariff.
Oh,
We have
okay.
Ken Polito at VHFA is the person we've been doing.
Okay.
And we can certainly put him in contact with him.
Perfect, thank you.
All right. Thank you, Ken.
I think that's it for me.
Make sure you stop and get a glass of champagne for John.
Pretty good, Ken.
I think this is okay to drive after.
Yes, yeah, you can drive, you could eat the plate full and drive home, you'd be fine. Strongest
All right.
thing in there is something called Fiore di Sicilia. No alcohol in it.
I'll raise a glass to it.
There you go.
Cheers.
Thanks, Ken.
All right, up next, Lincoln Park permit request, Enosburg Business Association concert series. Good evening.
Something fun. Yeah. Not that that's not fun.
This is funner.
No offense taken. Have a good night.
Thank you as well.
So I don't know if you guys have had time to review the permit request. What questions you have?
So it's a concert.
So essentially, the brainstorm that I had talking with some people all boiled down to how we have this big, beautiful park and we really don't utilize it enough. And so we've seen other communities have concert series with, we have our town band and they're great and they're wonderful, but wouldn't it be great to have maybe some food trucks and a band on the park? And so not going crazy, just trying to do it one night a month, June, July, and August. I've talked to some food truck people who've given me some thoughts and ideas to bring back to our committee. Started working on a band budget. I've talked to some banks who have shown some interest, so we're looking to, get sponsorships for this type of thing. But of course, we really can't do anything until we have permission to use the park. Here. So, initially, I had thought that we would, for safety purposes, of course, leave Main Street open, but try to shut down just that little stretch of Missisquoi and then the little stretch of School. But then after thinking about it, I think maybe if we could just utilize the Missisquoi side, kind of where the Lions Club puts their food trucks, for lack of a better word, for the dairy festival, then we wouldn't have to close down anything else. And of course, I would have to check in with Champlain Chevrolet. I was thinking 5:30 to 8:30ish, so depending what day we decide to do this on. The person I talked to today was like, you know, there's absolutely nothing open for food on Mondays. So like having food trucks on Monday,
Yeah, Chinese restaurant.
That's about it.
Chinese maybe, yeah.
I think that they're the only ones.
They might be. But having food trucks on a Monday would bring potentially people who are looking, you know.
Who actually want to eat.
Yeah.
I've done it.
Yeah. You know, so that was actually a new idea that was put in front of me today when I was talking with a food truck person. So it's kind of evolving, but of course, again, it all stems around utilizing the park and the vans, you know.
So the 5:30 to 8:30, is that like the music would be 5:30?
Yeah, that would be like the event itself. So, you know, I'm thinking like maybe an hour on either side for a tear down setup kind of thing. We would also, of course, this is assuming that the porta potty that is usually there through the summer, that's been provided, I think the last couple of years, right? If I'm not mistaken, we would provide another for that evening, for that event. But
Is
again,
this weather dependent?
it's a good question. Yeah, something we have to think
Would
about.
your music be on the bandstand?
Yes, yeah,
So unless the
So
wind is
maybe,
blowing or rain,
yeah.
they would be
Yeah.
undercover.
yeah.
Food vendors are in a cart, so it'd be only the customers that would
Yeah.
be in
I
trouble.
mean, it's kind of hard. Yeah, I mean, that's
But if you're
certainly
hungry, no.
a good question. It's kind of hard when you're booking a band to have
Have a rain date.
a rain date, you know?
I really like the idea, I just don't know if I'm a fan of closing Mrs. Queen School.
Yeah, I wouldn't close school. I would be thinking just that Mrs. Skoye stretch, like they do for Dairy Day. So you'd still be able to come up Mrs. Skoye, go down Stebbins, up School, up Main.
To reroute it.
Okay, so no, so,
Yeah,
So you have to modify your application, I guess.
yeah,
Right.
yeah,
so no school,
right.
That's the
no
only
school.
issue I have.
just Missisquoi.
Right, and again, like I said, I would obviously have to check in with Champlain Chevrolet because they are in business on that street, but I think that they're
think they
close
close
by that time. Yeah.
If they played it right, they could have some sort of sale going on with the.
Yeah, no, really.
Honestly,
customers
get
a free
people in the
supper.
door.
Yeah.
Every hot dog burger.
Well, I think it sounds like a good idea. What's the board's thoughts?
I'm excited about
They
that.
do it in Highgate, and it's, I know some people that will go a long ways for that. And there's a lot of young bands that would probably be happy to come and do a concert just to get their name out.
True, yeah.
I think it's
Yeah.
wonderful.
We have, I've had a couple people reach out to me. One of them is a Alban Brother tribute band, our own local Indian garage band, of course, and so, you know, we're researching all of that stuff now, but,
And I'm assuming admission would be free,
oh yeah.
and are you paying the bands, or?
Oh yeah, the bands would have to be paid. So
And that's
working on
going
the
to be
band
the-
budget, and that's where we would be looking to, my initial thought, without putting too much ahead of myself, is to figure out the band budget and then go to the banks. And we have 4 banks in town. And 2 of them already have been like, oh, that's a great idea. Like, come to us with more information when you're ready. So I'm hopeful we would be able to get the sponsorship covered that way.
Would it be proper if you had like a bucket and ask for donations? People that come?
A lot of times the bands actually have a bucket out for tips.
Yeah, but I mean the bucket,
Yeah, no, I mean,
or they,
maybe.
whatever they collect from the bucket would be what they get.
But if you get your
Oh,
band
the bands are
sponsored, that's
definitely
great.
not gonna do it for just that.
No.
Like, one of the bands is like $800. So I think on the high side, low side, you're looking at $500 to $600, on the high side, $800.
Music is not cheap anymore.
And it depends how many people are in the band. and
Yeah,
so on.
They're expensive.
Yeah. And so then all the food trucks would have their own insurance?
Yes,
And then
we would have
that would all be
certificates of insurance
collected.
from, absolutely.
Health department license, all that
Yep.
stuff. All right, what are we thinking?
I think it's exciting.
Do I have a motion to approve?
Yes.
I'll approve, but you gotta make
I have
the amendment to the
And
school
I,
street thing.
and I have a question. I presume I probably need to recuse myself and not vote
Attorney Hughes.
on the vice president of EVA.
Probably fair to do that, Sandy.
And the date might.
So, yeah,
change,
so,
we'll have to,
right, I said the
That's
third
that, yeah.
Thursday, but let's just say the
You
third
telling us
week
you're against it?
in June, July, August.
Okay.
I can come back to the board with specific dates once we nail that down.
Can we amend dates in the park use policy?
By you mean dates the applicant is asking for?
Well, I'm just thinking, like, if we approve this, can the board make an amendment to their permit request if any changes in the future?
Just so they don't have to start all over again.
Right.
Or can you make a motion to give me approval to proceed and then come back with a revised permit with specific
Yeah.
dates maybe? I don't know what's best for you guys.
Yeah, if you, I mean, there are a number of things, it seems like, that are gonna change in this potentially. So maybe the thing to do is your second suggestion.
Give me your blessing.
Right, give your blessing that the board is in favor of this and, you know, with some revisions to the application when you figure out more of the details.
Yeah.
Come back later with a revised application and they will approve it.
I think that works for me. It works for
Need it in
you.
Latin?
Sounds fair.
May I say that last year, there were some rainy days when we didn't have the band concert. And then when the time limit had come, we had 2 more weeks of beautiful weather, but they couldn't play because they weren't scheduled. And so why do we have to put a date on it? Why can't it be weather permitting?
Well, I think you do want to, you do.
Well,
need
I
to-
don't mean go into October, November, but I mean,
You do kind of need to identify dates though, because through the course of the year, especially spring and summer, you get requests to use the park for a wide variety of purposes and different organizations. So if you can't track, you know, who's using the park on what dates,
You'll end up with some
right,
overlap.
you might end up, you know, by mistake burning somebody, you know, in double park. Or
Double parking the park.
double book the
Double book,
park by mistake.
Ellen has her hand up, guys.
Ellen?
I was just gonna say, I believe that the way the contract is written, we are contracted to play 10 concerts, but last year we had trouble rehearsing because of COVID. And so I think last year we only did 8. And the big issue with August for us is that our director is a teacher, and so her school life starts again. And we also, it gets dark. It starts to be dark. That is our problem. As far as I agree, it was annoying to have that rain, but it's a light issue, and we have light in the bandstand, but then all the bugs come to the lights, and yes. Hopefully we will get all 10 this year.
All right.
Bug lights.
We good on that?
Yeah.
All right.
Can I have one more second?
Sure.
Just, if I can backtrack for a minute, I did just want to thank the board for agreeing to move forward with the grant thing and seeing how that all shakes out. It's definitely, I think, a learning curve for some of us as EI members. Like, I personally had no idea about that whole planning commission piece, and I think it's
good to be able to figure all that out. So just me personally, I just want to say thank you
You're
for
welcome.
agreeing to
Just
do
shows we
that.
need to live together better.
Yep. Well, yeah, no, I think that, you know, I think in really true good faith, we just want to see how can we move things along and what things can be done. And I think if there's a way somehow we can all just figure out how to figure out the process and work together, there's so much we can do in this community. So anyway, I just want to say thank you again, and that's it for me.
Thank
You're
you for saying
welcome.
that.
We appreciate your momentum.
Yes, and have a glass of champagne before you go. Ain't trying to get everybody sloshed. Cheers.
Cheers.
See you guys.
Hi, John.
Have a good night, Sean.
So are you guys doing a motion? to-
No.
No, not yet.
Just, yeah, they gotta revise
She's
it.
gonna resubmit.
Okay.
They got
I
time.
blessed her.
Okay, up next, wastewater allocation request for 150 St. Alban Street.
So Gary
Yes.
says that we ought
I
to
think
go for
Gary-
it, so.
Yeah, I think Gary had to,
He's probably asleep in the
I think
hallway.
he is.
I think he said he was gonna step out and just check on.
Gary's had a very long, hard day. But
And we are
the
thankful
water's,
to have water.
Yes.
It's clean for, yeah.
yeah, water service is restored now. I think he was kind of hanging around to tell everybody that they had finished backfilling up on Pearl Street. And so, you know, it's gonna be there for a little bit. We'll have to schedule somebody when the weather gets a little bit better to come in and do a patch.
You speed bump for now.
Right, exactly.
My traffic
It's
calming.
probably gonna be a little bit rough on that spot there where they had to dig up to find the leak.
May I ask you, do you know where was the leak?
I know approximately where it is. It took them a long time to find it. They were digging for hours and hours, but it, okay, so you're at the intersection of Pearl Street and Main Street. If you go back west, headed towards St. Albans up Pearl Street, it's approximately 15 to 20 feet up Pearl Street from that intersection. So very close to where the other two breaks happened 2 years ago. It was almost 2 years ago to the day. It was in February of 2020. You
The
guys-
leak was up Pearl Street?
Yes.
It wasn't up Main?
No, it was kind of at the intersection of Pearl and Main.
Yeah, but they were digging towards Main when,
I think they were digging around. From what Gary told me, it was about 15 feet up from that corner of Pearl. He said close to where the sign is for Champlain Farms. You know, they got that big sign.
yeah,
How
on it.
deep's the main there?
6 feet, 5 feet?
Yeah, about that,
They hit frost at about 4 feet, so digging got a little rough.
right?
They hit frost at 4 feet?
That's what he told me too.
Do you think it has something to do with all the truck traffic, like around in that corner?
Just with the frost shifting.
It
Who knows?
could be. He said that they also found a very large rock right over the boulder. And so, you know, could have been
Over
there.
the line?
Over the line. So, you know, that rock was probably there for 40 years, 50 years, who knows?
One
Finally had
abandoned
to
log
say,
truck
And
went
it
around the corner.
Right, it finally
It
got
wasn't
enough
me.
pressure on it, pushed down into the pipe and busted it wide open. It was, he said it was a pretty big hole. He said it was like that. So
I
water.
figured it,
to a
I
wall.
figured it had to be a pretty big hole judging by how dirty the water was leaving
Yeah,
that place.
and it was leaking.
It's like flushing hydrants dirty.
Yes,
Part of that
it
was also from
absolute
the fire
brown.
at Blue Winds that caused the dirty water prior to. I know some people experienced that over the weekend because of the fire.
Just
They had
a
to
big
draw so much
fluctuation
water.
of
You
volume.
know, we can be extremely grateful that we have 2 streets left from that fire on Friday night. If it hadn't been for one person pumping gas and seeing what was going on, you could have had half of the lower part of Missisquoi Street, part of Pleasant Street, the Catholic Church, maybe down that way a little bit more if all the propane had gone.
I don't
So
think it would
we
have
were-
been hot
that was
enough
very
quick
nice.
enough. I think it would have vented.
We were really lucky.
Still hot.
All right.
Yeah, so anyway, the water line break issue is resolved now. We'll have a little bit of bumpiness on on the road until we can get someone scheduled to come in and, you know, put an asphalt patch over that, but everybody's got water service as of now. So, to get to the question at hand, we have a water and wastewater allocation request for 150 St. Alban Street.
Is that little part that's out kind of separate from St. Alban Street? Is that where that is?
It's a
Right
vacant
here is
lot.
the vacant lot right here.
Yeah, it was for sale for a while.
On the
It
right-hand
did-
side.
Right next to
That way.
Larry's old house?
I think is it a blue house? And then
Okay, the
there's a
blue
vacant lot
one-story
right
house,
after.
okay, gotcha.
Yeah.
Right.
Yep.
So there is a lot there that was for sale. It sold, and this person is looking at building a single-family home on that lot. So they're looking for one water and one wastewater allocation for that single-family home. Staff sees no issue with this. We have capacity in both services to provide that. So staff is recommending the board approve the request.
Make a motion.
I'll second it.
You have the first and the second, all those in favor of approving water and wastewater allocations for 150 St. Albans Street, say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, nay.
One more tax bill.
All right, that's unanimous. Up next, adoptions of roads and bridge standards.
So in your packets, you guys will see copies of the state's town and road bridge standards. These are taken right out of V-Trans handbook for local officials. No changes to this. The board has approved these for quite a few years, but you have to update that approval every few years. So last time the board adopted these were in July 9th of 2019. So the state is now looking for you guys to just, you know, re-adopt those again, but there's been no changes from 2019 on this. So we would just need the board to sign off on this and make a motion to approve those road and bridge standards.
We'll move.
You have the first,
Second.
Danny with the second, all those in favor of adopting the state road and bridge standards, say aye.
Aye.
And those opposed, nay.
Okay, so I've got an original here. There's two places to sign, oh, looks like you take that on there. Oh, okay. So there's two places to sign, for the board to sign on here. May I just pass it down if each of you can sign that?
You want to do this when he's packing up for executive?
Might as well.
Okay,
One at a
sure.
time.
Yep.
I think that's exciting today.
All right, managers report.
Okay, this will be very quick. First thing, I just want to make you guys aware of some correspondence, some email correspondence that staff had received, specifically myself and Gary, from a resident on Orchard Street, 227 Orchard Street. His name is Josh Brunel, and he's very concerned about speeding along Orchard Street. And in his email correspondence, you can see he's requesting a permanent electronic speeding sign be placed somewhere in the vicinity of his home at 227 Orchard Street. I also copied Sheriff Langevin and my response to Mr. Brunel, and told him I would make the board aware of his concerns, and so that's what I'm doing, and he seemed appreciative at least of bringing his concerns to your attention. As you guys know, we had budgeted for some additional speeding signs in 2022, didn't make the budget cuts though, and so we don't have anything in there to buy any more electronic speeding signs, but just thought I would at least make you guys aware of this, that he's upset at what he's seeing there. He's in his home is
Right at the top of the hill.
yeah, it's kind of like
Welcome
right
to
on
Orchard
that
Street.
crest on the east side of Orchard Street, not the west side, but the east side as you're coming up over that crest. And that's where he feels like, there's some safety issues. If you go at 25, it's not a problem. But when people are going 45.
Or 70, like the one the sheriff got.
Yeah, exactly. Then, yeah, I can see where it would be a problem.
Did he happen to get the feedback if the speed signs helped?
He just
I mean,
moved in, I
he
think.
just moved
Yeah, we just barely
okay.
bought the place.
Yeah, he
Okay.
hasn't lived there
Month
very
ago.
long. My understanding is he's only been there a few months.
Yeah, he hasn't been there very long.
Yeah, so I'm just curious if the residents felt a difference.
Yeah, he wasn't there in the summer when we had those up there.
Is there a way for us to get feedback? Like, did they actually feel it? We've got the data to say what the speed did, but do
I
they
can-
feel it?
Well,
Can I send it?
I live right off from Orchard Street. I don't live on Orchard Street, but I live on, a dead-end road that comes directly off Orchard Street, and I can hear everything going on Orchard Street from where I live. And I can tell you quite honestly, I don't think they made much of a difference. I wish I could say that they did, but, the times when the sheriff's department was flagging people at 70 miles an hour, those signs were up there.
Yep.
And people were ignoring them. It's just, I'm at a loss to really explain why people feel free to speed the way that they do down some of the streets in this community. I saw it today. I was going down Orchard Street, I took a left off from Main onto Orchard. A woman turned right in front of me, taking a right from Main onto Orchard, so I was in back of her. I was going 25, and she pulled out a good half mile in front of me in no time flat, which tells me she was
She
probably
wasn't
going,
doing 25.
no, she was probably going about 45 miles an hour down that east side, which is the most populated part of Orchard Street. That's where most of the houses are. It thins out a little bit, and you get on the west side of that gully there.
Is there a big culvert in that gully?
There is a culvert.
Box culvert or something?
Yeah, there is a culvert there.
If we
for
took that out,
getting
people would speed
split.
down that road.
Yeah, I don't know.
Wouldn't be able to go through.
And that was in broad daylight. That was probably a little after noon.
Yep.
Maybe like 12:15 or so. She was gone.
The
She
people
took
that-
that corner and she just went whoom.
The people that you're shaking your head about and thinking, that you don't understand, the only way to get to those people is through their wallets. And we
Yeah.
really don't have the resources to be able to do it. I mean, if we had if we
speeding
had an
tickets.
ugly gung-ho police officer that was here 24/7, it might be a different story, but we know that can't happen, and it does make it very difficult, because they know. They know
Yeah.
they're not gonna get caught.
Well, why can't we put a rubber bump that in the winter you take it away, but in the summertime, I mean, to me,
The street's
Isn't
so long,
it-
I think we'd have
isn't
to have
it-
a bunch of them.
Well,
Well,
that, we got this letter in the winter, so.
Right.
And what about liability when it tears out the bottom of somebody's car?
I think they've got to do that if you're driving the right way.
So I think this may
I think
be a
that's part of the
conversation for
liability
a
thing,
different meeting.
Yeah.
I think we can go all night about
We could.
speeding on Orchard, but
Yeah.
yes.
Or Orchard.
It's probably true.
Yeah.
Anyway, I just, I
Thanks.
told
Thank you.
Mr. Brunel I would bring it to your attention, so that's what I've done. Next thing, this is a follow-up. I think it was Eli last meeting had asked about safety and Katie numbers and the SQRP report, and you were looking for an explanation a little bit
I
about
was just curious what they were.
what some of those numbers were. So I attached the actual formula on the back here so you guys could see what those are. So the safety numbers are the system average interruption frequency index. That's what safety stands for. And the way you get to those numbers is it's customers out divided by customers served. And that gives you your safety number. I think what you actually were asking about was the Katie numbers, which
Which
is
is the one we didn't hit.
the customer average interruption duration index. And that is formula for figuring that out is customer hours out divided by customers out. So that number you see there for the Katie numbers is an hour number.
Cool.
So I just thought I'd follow up on that, give you a little more explanation on what what those safety and KD numbers represented. And then lastly, you know, as you guys know, this is my last meeting as village manager for the village of Enosburg Falls. Want to wish you guys all the best, and I thank you for the opportunity to serve. So a fond farewell to all of you and to the community, and I wish you all the best.
Cheers.
Good luck, John.
Yeah, do cheers to that.
I realize that this is made with King Arthur all-purpose.
You want to cheers?
I'm all set, thank you. Not that I want to cheers you, but.
We wish.
You want to pass that down to him? Thank you.
You can raise your hypothetical.
Yeah.
We thank you for 17 years of service, and we wish you the best in Lindenville.
Thank
Cheers.
you. Thank you very much, guys.
Have a bite. That sounds
All right.
strange.
You're very good, Jim. Thank you.
They weren't getting these right good.
He dropped this behind his chair, he needs another one.
It's behind, if you spin towards the safe, it's by
Did you-
those
did you
chairs
drop
behind
it?
you.
Yeah.
You have to.
You want another
I
one?
made plenty.
Don't worry, we have spares.
Are we over on the camera?
Almost. Other business, anybody have any other business?
I do.
What
I'll
you
be
got?
quick, I promise. Follow up to, upon John's departure, Edward Jones is one of our retirements where our set plan is. We have to have an authorized person on that account. Right now, it's presently John. We would be looking for the board tonight to make a motion appointing Lori Stanley, our staff accountant. She right now is kind of the backup and handles all of that. She's aware of this appointment. But we need to have that happen tonight just because our next meeting is not until March, end of March, 22nd.
22nd.
22nd?
All right,
Okay.
we're not having meetings.
Mark is the
Right.
month that looks like
All
that.
right, need a formal motion to appoint Lori as our Edward Jones representative.
A move.
Don't second that.
Eli with a second, Leonard with, sorry, Eli with first, Leonard with a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
And those opposed, nay.
I have a couple more quick things kind of along that same note. I'll be quick. The other one that has come up, and the board may not necessarily need to make a decision tonight, but for the Vexa board appointment, John right now obviously is kind of the head contact for that. Gary is the alternate. Gary has expressed that that's not a position he's comfortable with, which would be kind of attending board meetings and keeping up on all these projects that Ken spoke about tonight. I've talked to Ken a little bit today about kind of the importance of having representation on that board. It's going to keep us kind of up to date on all of these projects. It is a meeting the first Wednesday of every month. And it also helps them ensure that they have a quorum because it's based upon the utility. So if decisions need to be made to move these projects along, that they have it. I think it's beneficial to us to do that. Not sure what direction the board wants to go with that, but I am willing to remove Gary and then put myself as the alternate, and then once we have a new village manager, appoint that person to fill the shoes that John's been filling, obviously at this point. But I think it's beneficial to the village to continue our presence, and I'm bringing it up tonight because they meet the first Wednesday, so there would be a March meeting before our next March meeting. So.
Well, Abby's willing to help us out.
Absolutely. I move that we appoint Abby
I'll
to
second.
be that representative.
Okay, Sandy with the first, Heather with the second. All those in favor of removing Gary and appointing Abby as our Vexa representative, say aye.
Aye.
And those opposed, nay. Thank you,
Okay.
Abby.
Quick last thing, and I promise I will be quiet. Regarding the truck purchase for the highway department, we have the final proposal in hand. Ken was able to get that at the beginning of the week. Everything that's the entire truck package that Ken has sat down and gone over with a fine-tooth comb with both of our sales reps comes to $181,200. So we would need to sign on page 2 if you guys are good moving forward with this quote. It's everything that they need, everything that's been discussed, and it's already kind of under the 195 that we anticipated, and this is before our trade-in, so we'll be in the end. But the importance of signing off on this now and getting it back to them is it locks us into this 181, and regardless of what happens between now and a year from now when we get the truck, this is the price and they can't change it. So when we're doing the transition, if you guys are good with it, I just wanted to let everybody know.
this was the one that had the clause about like, on voting, like the community.
Right, if the budget gets voted, or not the budget, if this article gets voted down on the Australian ballot, we are not locked in. I mean, they probably have 10 other people in line for trucks like this, so that's nothing on their end.
Okay.
So just an update on that. If everybody's good, I'll have you guys sign off on that when we do the transition. And that was it, I promise.
Any other business? Hearing none, I'll entertain a motion to move into executive session for the purpose of discussing a personnel item.
I make the move.
Leonard the first, Ela the second, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye.